For these cavers, what began as an adventure quickly turned into a nightmare. Today we are exploring 7 real-life caving stories where not everyone made it out alive. The Manchester Hole Incident. It was supposed to be an unforgettable school trip. In November 2005, 14-year-old Joseph Leeser and 10 classmates, along with his math teacher and a 17-year-old volunteer caver, set out to explore the Nidderdale Caves in North Yorkshire, England. Among the group were his closest friends, Charlie and Amy. Spirits were high. Nobody knew that one of them wouldn't make it out. The group entered the cave system through a small hole in the earth called Manchester Hole, a narrow, unassuming opening that drops into a vast underground world. They descended into a chamber the size of a football field. The ceiling loomed 50 feet above, covered in jagged stalactites. Cold water pooled around their boots, just a few inches deep. The kids laughed and splashed. It felt like a real adventure. They pushed on through a muddy slope into a second chamber smaller than the first. It still held the entire group, and the water there was no more than ankle deep. But ahead, the path tightened. They crawled through a cramped 40-foot tunnel on hands and knees, twisting through the stone with a muddy stream soaking them to the bone. But at the end was a space they could finally stand in again. Everyone made it through. The math teacher came last. That's when things started to go wrong. The young guide, familiar with these caves, immediately noticed something was off. The water. It was much higher than usual. He'd never seen anything like it, even in storms. But there'd been no rain forecast. Outside, the skies were clear, windy, but dry. Inside, the water was rising, fast. The kids' boots were filling. The narrow chamber was so tight they could barely move. It didn't take long for the water to reach their knees. Panic started to build. Realizing the danger, the guide made a snap decision. They had to turn back now. The math teacher went first, leading the students one by one through the narrow crawl space they'd come in through. But while most were still in the tunnel, disaster struck. A surge of ice-cold water flooded the chamber. It hit like a wave. Amy, Joseph, and the guide, still in the back, were forced to retreat to the previous chamber, gasping for air. But even there, the water kept rising. They were nearly submerged. There was no time to wait. With lungs full of breath, they dove back into the tunnel. This time, it was clearer, no students blocking the way. The guide led the charge, with Amy and Joseph right behind. Just as they reached the chamber before the exit, the guide grabbed Amy and shoved her towards safety. But Joseph wasn't behind them anymore. Somewhere in that flooded tunnel, just feet from safety, Joseph vanished. The guide turned to go back, but the math teacher insisted on getting the rest of the group out first. It was too late. Joseph Leeser had drowned, trapped in a dark tunnel where the water had risen too fast, and there was no air left to breathe. When the survivors emerged onto the surface, the sun was shining. The sky was blue. There wasn't a single drop of rain. So, what caused the flood? Later investigations revealed a terrifying twist. That day, gale force winds had swept across the region, slamming into the nearby Scarhouse Reservoir. The wind pressure alone was enough to push thousands of gallons of water out of the reservoir and into the river system below. That river connected, underground, to the cave the children had been exploring. Within 1 hour, the river had risen over 4 feet. The cave, unable to drain fast enough, flash flooded in minutes. By the time emergency responders arrived, less than 20 minutes after the call, the water had already receded. Joseph's body was found in the narrow tunnel, just feet from the chamber, just minutes too late. The Manchester Hole incident remains one of the most haunting reminders that caves don't flood from rain alone, and that sometimes even blue skies can lie. The Manatee Springs cave diving incident, March 14, 2022. 2 teens, William and Harry, set out on a cave dive in Manatee Springs, Florida. With them were their dads, George and Jack. They weren't supposed to be there. All 4 were only intro-level cave certified. But Manatee's siphon system, it's traverse diving territory, strictly for fully certified cave divers with prior experience in that exact system. They ignored the rules. They entered the cave at Fredman's Sink, planning to dive with the current and exit 1,700 feet away at Catfish Hotel. It was a bold move for any diver. 11:17 a.m. They began the dive. Each wore 2 tanks, 3,800 psi. At 100 feet deep, air vanishes fast, 4 times the surface rate. William and Harry led the way. Their dads followed, GoPros rolling, lights shining. At 900 feet, they reached Sioux Sink, an emergency exit. Sunlight peeked through. But that wasn't their plan. They pushed on. 700 feet to go. But when they reached the Catfish Hotel, there was no exit line, no markers, no visible way out. The tunnel twisted oddly, like a double L. Light should have been there, but wasn't. They searched, found nothing. Panic creeping in, they made a call, turned back. But now they were moving against the current. Their air consumption spiked. George still had 3,000 psi, just enough. He spotted the light at Sioux Sink and surfaced with William at noon. But Harry and Jack never came up. William wanted to dive back in. George said, "No, call 911. Meanwhile, deep inside the cave, Harry and his dad, Jack, missed the Sioux Sink exit. Again. Their lights were too bright, washing out the natural light from above. Boulders blocked the gap. The exit passed right by them, unseen. They kept diving, desperate, out of options, out of time. 20 minutes later, Harry spotted a glow, Fredman's sink. He raced through the tunnel, glancing back. His dad's light was still there. 12:20 p.m. Harry surfaced, one tank empty, the other was nearly drained. But Jack didn't make it. George and William met Harry topside. All 3 were shaking, soaked, and silent. They had all passed the exit without realizing it. Later, they learned why. Catfish Hotel had no visible exit line. Worse, reaching it from inside required navigating a tricky double bend that hid all surface light. The only people who know this? Divers who've done it before. That's why most cave divers enter at Catfish and exit at Fredman, not the other way around. 12:50 p.m. Rescue teams arrived. They found Jack's body just 100 feet from the exit at Fredman's sink. Both his tanks were bone dry. He had traveled over 3,400 feet through that cave system and ran out of air in the last stretch. His final movement was recorded at 12:17 p.m., just 3 minutes before his son surfaced, 17 minutes after George and William made it out. Jack was almost there, but almost doesn't count underground. Waiana Panapa Caves. Incident January 29th, 2017, Maui, Hawaii. 32-year-old Gregory Wilhelm was on a dream vacation with 3 friends soaking up the sun at Waiana Panapa State Park. They weren't thrill seekers, just tourists, just exploring. At the edge of the black sand beach, they stumbled onto something unexpected, a narrow opening in the rock. It was the entrance to the famous Waiana Panapa Caves. Beautiful, ancient, dangerous. A shallow pool shimmered in the light. The women stayed by the entrance. Gregory? He wanted to go deeper. He had no diving gear, no flashlight, just a phone and a Ziploc bag. Still, Gregory convinced one of his male friends to go inside with him. No guide, no plan, just curiosity. They waded through waist-deep water. The light from the entrance faded behind them. Soon, a giant boulder blocked the way. Underneath it, a vertical shaft, deep, a known diving spot. Gregory wanted to check it out. Just a minute-long dive, he said. In and out. So they went under. Only Gregory had light. His friend followed behind, swimming through shadows. But the cave dropped off fast, deeper than expected, narrow, cold. Gregory kept going. His friend? He got scared and turned back without saying a word. He surfaced where they'd started, alone. No Gregory, no light, no bubbles, no sound. Panic hit fast. The 2 women entered the cave to find him. The friend was shaking, disoriented. Gregory was still missing. There was no time to wait. The friend dove again, this time blind, telling the women to scream so he could follow the sound back. On the 3rd dive, something shimmered in the dark. A faint glow. It was Gregory's phone light, still working. But Gregory was gone. They sprinted out of the cave and called 911. Rescue crews rushed in, but it was too late. Gregory had taken a wrong turn, deep inside a twisting tunnel system. Disoriented and out of breath, he found a small pocket of air. But the cave's water levels were shifting fast. Waves surged inside. Currents pulled against every move. Each attempt to retrace his steps pushed him further from the exit. He drowned, alone, in total darkness. When divers recovered his body, he was found 75 feet deep in the cave, just feet from where his flashlight still glowed. Caves don't care if you're brave, or curious, or on vacation. One wrong turn, and you're just gone. The Santa Rosa Blue Hole Incident, March 26, 2016, Santa Rosa, New Mexico. A cave system that had been sealed for decades. 2 experienced divers, a deadly mistake. Mike Young and Navy veteran Shane Thompson were part of a team sent to map an unexplored section of a cave system, newly reopened after 40 years. The last time anyone had been down there, it ended in tragedy. Now, it was Mike and Shane's turn. They knew the risks. They were prepared, or so they thought. The plan? Mike would explore a tight spot at 140 feet, and then drop down to another narrow passage at 165 feet. Shane was to stay behind, safe, at 165 feet. But once Mike disappeared into the dark, Shane ignored the plan. He followed. Through the jagged rocks, the maze of tight turns, Shane trailed Mike deeper. The passages narrowed. The water grew thick with silt. At 195 feet deep, Shane got stuck. His rebreather caught on a rock, the tension rising, his breathing becoming fast and shallow. Panic set in. Mike was right behind him. Surprised to find Shane stuck, Mike spent minutes trying to free him, but the cave was too tight for both of them to move. They had to act fast. Mike pushed and Shane slipped free. But now they had a bigger problem, the guideline. It was gone. Shane had moved it. They had no idea where to go. Shane pushed on, alone. The guideline was lost. His heart raced. His breathing shot up. The rebreather wouldn't keep up. His mind spiraled. He switched to his emergency bailout tank. But now the water was too tight. The passages too small. And that's when it happened again. Shane got stuck. Mike? Nowhere to be seen. Shane fought, thrashed, desperate to escape. But the walls were unforgiving. Then Mike reappeared. He grabbed Shane. Hope. But Shane wasn't calm anymore. He lunged. He swam under Mike and got stuck again. Minutes turned into hours. The fight for air. The struggle. Mike with a torn gear, but determined to get out. Shane, his breathing spiraled into hyperventilation. And then it happened. The worst case scenario. Mike reached a dead end. He backtracked, thinking Shane was ahead, but Shane wasn't. Mike tugged on the line. No movement. He turned. He had to find Shane. Shane, trapped in a narrow opening, lifeless, no rebreather, no bailout tank. His fight was over. Mike couldn't get Shane out. He was too stuck. He had no choice. He had to leave. The next day, Mike returned. Alone. Through those narrow, suffocating passages, Mike retrieved his friend's body. The same passages they had explored together just hours before. A deadly mistake, disregarding the plan, cost a life. One mistake in a cave, and it's too late to turn back. Culverson Creek Incident. November 28, 1985. Culverson Creek Cave, West Virginia. A group of 7 experienced cavers enters a 20.8-meter-long system in Greenbrier County, unaware that today, their lives would change forever. Originally planning to explore Friar's Hole, heavy rain forced them to change plans and switch to the less flooded Fuller's entrance. They had no idea what awaited them. The cave entrance was narrow, with a stream flowing swiftly over slippery rocks. A boulder stood in the center of the passage, half submerged. As they pushed forward, disaster struck. 26-year-old Eric Sackle led the group, moving toward the boulder. And then, without warning, the boulder shifted, tilting to the left. Despite their frantic attempts to stop it, the rock pinned Eric by the head. He was trapped. Panic set in. 3 cavers tried desperately to move the boulder. Nothing worked. They used old truck parts as levers, but they were ineffective. With the water flowing around them, time was slipping away. One member raced to get a hydraulic auto-jack, while another called the Eastern Region Cave Rescue Network. At 3:59 p.m., Eric's pulse was still strong, but by 4:10 p.m., he lost consciousness. Blood trickled from his nostrils as his body lay motionless, pinned by the weight of the rock. The hydraulic jack arrived at 4:20 p.m., and with the help of crowbars, the team managed to shift the boulder. Eric was carefully moved to a dry spot, and CPR was immediately started. Minutes felt like hours. The Rennick Rescue Squad arrived soon after, taking over CPR. Despite their best efforts, Eric's condition didn't improve. By 6:05 p.m., he was pronounced dead. A day that started with an adventure ended in tragedy. One wrong move in the dark depths of a cave, and a life was lost. Cave rescue teams are trained to save lives, but in the tightest spaces, even the most experienced cavers can't outrun the weight of fate. Sterkfontein Cave. Incident, September 29, 1984. Sterkfontein Cave, South Africa. Cave explorer Nuno Gomes and his two friends, Peter Verhel and Malcolm, set out to explore the unmapped sections of the Sterkfontein Cave system. Their mission was to lay a guideline from the entrance to the farthest point of the wet cave area, known as Milner Hall. Everything started smoothly. Nuno plunged into the water and successfully laid the line, covering an impressive 396 feet of cave tunnel. Afterward, the trio ventured back in to follow the newly placed guideline. As they neared the end, everything seemed perfect, until Nuno felt Peter touch his back. But something was wrong. Peter was no longer behind them. Confused, Nuno returned to the spot where Peter had been, only to find that Peter had entered a side tunnel. Nuno tried to get Peter's attention, tapping him to return to the main line and exit. But before they knew it, Peter disappeared again. This time, Nuno and Malcolm assumed Peter had taken an alternate exit to avoid a tight squeeze. So, they didn't go back to look for him. After surfacing, Nuno and Malcolm realized that Peter hadn't made it out. They waited, but Peter still hadn't surfaced. 4 long hours passed. They were out of air, the silt had stirred up the water, and visibility was near zero. Finally, they exited the cave and a search began. But what no one realized was that Peter wasn't dead. He had gotten sidetracked by the cave's complex 3D layout and the stirred-up silt that had made it nearly impossible to orient himself. Peter wasn't lost. He was trapped. He found a small room and decided to wait, hoping his friends would find him. He used his light to signal, but no one came. He even banged his tank on the rocks, but still, no response. Exhausted and hopeless, Peter eventually fell asleep in total darkness, losing track of time. The search continued, but as days passed, visibility remained poor, and the police were convinced Peter didn't survive. They called off the search after a full week, and then another week passed with no sign of him. But Peter was still alive. He spent 14 days in total darkness, starving, losing weight, and clinging to life in the cave. On October 6th, a full week after his disappearance, the police resumed their search but found no sign of Peter. Weeks dragged on. For 6 weeks, the search continued with no results, until finally, the police decided to close off the cave for good. Then, a breakthrough. Volunteers, including Nuno, began to search for a connection between the dry and wet cave systems. Nuno's contribution was crucial. He discovered the link that allowed them to enter the wet sections of the cave once again. It was then that they found footprints, leading them to a dead end, where they discovered Peter's lifeless body. Beside him was a note. "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." A final message from the young man who had fought to survive for so long. The autopsy revealed Peter had died from starvation after being trapped for 3 weeks. In the end, Peter's courage and determination to survive were undeniable. Though his decision to explore on his own ultimately led to tragedy, it's clear that he fought until the very end. The Crooked Swamp Cave Incident. It was March 27, 1982. Donald Wellner, a seasoned caver, stood at the narrow entrance of West Virginia's Crooked Swamp Cave system. With him were his 2 teenage sons, Christopher and Roger, and a group of 12 eager Boy Scouts, all ready for what was supposed to be a routine day of exploration. The plan was simple: go in, look around, and get out before nightfall. The entrance was tiny, only 16 by 28 inches. But Donald wasn't worried. He was the biggest member of the group, and his rule was simple: if I can make it through, everyone else can too. At around 2 p.m., they squeezed into the cave. After a short crawl, they gathered in a small interior chamber. Donald, always the leader, took a moment to survey a few tight passages branching off from the main room. None of them were marked, none of them mapped. Still, he chose one. It looked just wide enough to push through. 18 by 20 inches, coated in slick mud and angling downward. He inched forward on his belly, his arms pinned to his sides. He couldn't lift his head, couldn't turn around. His sons followed closely behind. Then it happened. The mud beneath him vanished. The floor gave way. Donald slid. He plummeted into a hidden 5-inch wide vertical crevice, a narrow, twisting slit in the rock, angled at a brutal 30 degrees. The mud made it impossible to stop. He kept sliding until the walls hugged him like a vice. His hands were trapped, his chest compressed. He was wedged in, head first, at a downward angle, completely helpless. His sons tried pulling on his feet. Nothing. They called for the other adult, a man named Jim, who tried the same thing. No luck. Every time they pulled, rocks slid forward, blocking the space even more. Donald was now being crushed by his own environment. Jim crawled back to the surface and called for help. Rescue teams arrived quickly, CAVER'S, firefighters, police. But the passage was so narrow, only one person could reach Donald at a time. They tried ropes, they tried pulling, they brought tools to chisel the rock, but hours passed with almost no progress. Donald was now cold, thirsty, and exhausted. Hypothermia was becoming a real threat. Rescuers thought they could reach him from the other side to deliver food and water, but the only ones small enough to make the crawl were 2 teenage girls, Lynn and Nancy Taylor. Even they couldn't get close enough to reach his face. There was no way to deliver supplies. So they decided to dig, from the surface down, straight through 20 feet of dirt and rock. Sunday came and went. They got within 12 feet of Donald's location, but now they had to dig sideways. It was agonizingly slow. Meanwhile, Donald's voice had faded to grunts and faint moans, a terrifying sign that hypothermia was setting in. Monday morning. The temperature in the cave dropped further. Still no breakthrough. They sent a nurse into the tunnel with a handheld Doppler machine, trying to detect a pulse in Donald's legs. Nothing. But it wasn't definitive. His legs were freezing cold. His core could still be alive. Time was out. Rescuers made the call to use their last resort, explosives. Controlled dynamite charges fired off underground in a desperate attempt to break through the final bedrock wall. Tuesday morning, March 30th, over 2.5 days after Donald first got stuck, rescuers finally broke through. A doctor crawled in immediately, but it was too late. Donald Wellner had died. The cold had won. It took another full day to retrieve his body. The autopsy confirmed what everyone feared. Hypothermia had taken him sometime between Sunday night and early Monday morning. Following the tragedy, the Crooked Swamp Cave was restricted, its passages sealed off or made accessible only by permit. The incident became one of the most sobering cave fatalities in U.S. history, a haunting reminder that in caving, a single wrong turn in the dark can be a death sentence. Some caves never let go. If this gripped you, hit like, subscribe, and share, because these stories deserve to be remembered.